He kōna I purangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
No mai, whakaronga mai ki te Aotai whenua. Welcome to Country Life. I'm Sally Round.
And I'm Duncan Smith. G'day, great to have your company. Today, we take you for a stroll back into the past of public radio rural broadcasting to celebrate RNZ turning 100 this year.
And later, fancy the idea of your body being snuggled into a cosy woolen coffin when you die? Not to put too morbid a spin on things, it's a great story about a family in the wool trade who found a niche business using beautiful New Zealand wool.
But first to our guest this week. Ross Dunlop has spent his life on the family farm in Huntaway. He and wife Jan took over the running of the property over 40 years ago. The former South Taranaki mayor has seen many changes in the district over time, including efforts to restore native bush and improve water quality in the dairy country.
This shows you where we are.
We've got a lovely little lookout here.
Yeah.
Oh, and you can see the sea as well.
See? That's the town of Huntaway, the little coastal village.
And can you tell me a little bit about this, the home farm we're on?
I've lived here all my life, and I've actually lived in 3 houses on the farm. I've sort of just moved around the farm, and so some people have moved all around the world. I've only just moved around the farm. And so when Jan and I got married, we moved here into the house here 46 years ago. So yeah, I grew up on the farm. Originally it was a sheep and beef farm, and then in 1989 we converted to dairying. Lamb prices and wool were not looking good, and we are sort of in a dairying area, so we milk around about 450 cows on about 450 acres.
And looking out, we've just come through a lovely little bushwalk just off the house, and I can see some other sections of bush that have been fenced off and look like they're pretty well established. Can you tell me about some of the conservation efforts on farm?
I've always had a real big interest in native trees and conservation, but I also want to have a productive farm as well, so it's kind of getting that balance right. When I grew up on the farm, there was really very little bush. It was pretty much a sterile farm with just animals and grass. But I've always liked trees and particularly native trees. When I started farming, I just started planting little areas, fencing off places. And it's amazing how just fencing off somewhere will encourage the bush to grow.
Pockets of bush have been fenced off and left to regenerate, and waterways have also been fenced off to improve water quality on farm. Catchment groups have also been an important part of these efforts, with Ross having been an early member of the region's first catchment group.
A lot of farmers now just realise how important the bush is, and that it actually makes being a farmer and farming a more pleasant activity, because you've actually got shelter, shade, and just a more pleasant environment to work in. I really enjoy travelling around the farm, seeing things develop.
You've been very involved with catchment groups, and again,
yes,
we're seeing that as a key driver of some of the environmental restoration efforts.
Yep.
Can you tell me a little bit about your catchment specifically?
Oh, I think catchment groups are great because that's the local people buying into the idea. One of the things in Taranaki we had early on was a very proactive regional council as far as planting our waterways, and so in some ways we're a little bit later coming into the catchment group idea, because the regional council are almost by default a catchment group. In more recent times we realised that we really, as farmers, we've got to step up, and so I chair the Wananoto catchment group, and that was the first catchment group formed in Taranaki. Then we've now formed the Taranaki catchment community with 14 other catchment groups spread around the province.
It's not just the environment Ross is keen on protecting. He's also passionate about preserving the area's history, documenting land use changes over time.
It's kind of the perfect farm for Jan and I, because we are both interested in our local history, in native plantings and conservation and bird life and Māori history. So the farm has all that, and also farming history as well.
We take a look inside an old wool shed, capturing some of the local history.
Yeah, so this is a wool shed. I actually built this in 1982 there was another old shed here and used a lot of the materials out of it. We were still sheep farming then, but I thought probably the future of sheep farming wasn't looking so good on this good country. And so I built it so it could be used functionally for other things. We've had weddings in here, we have all sorts of functions.
I saw there was a little art exhibition on the wool stencils.
Yes.
And I see some hanging on the wall there and things. Yeah, lovely.
Yeah. The previous owners of part of the farm were the Batten family, and they were really ahead of their time.
So for you, it's also about securing the history of the property and farming practices.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Yeah, I think I've always believed that, like conservation, it's not just about the natural environment, it's also about the human environment and the stories that go with it, and preserving those for the future. Of course, the old wall stencils, which you don't use anymore. No, they just write on the bales now with a felt pen.
Yeah,
and
it's a bit of history, really, isn't it?
Yes, the stencils are quite neat. In fact, we had a wall stencil exhibition here a couple of years ago.
Do you have one for the original property?
We had a very boring brand. It was ICD. That was our wall brand. Ian Crawford Dunlop, my father.
Oh, right.
And that was Jan's parents.
Oh, the Kowhai.
Te
Kowhai, yeah.
Te Kowhai, yeah. So those are the sort of the brands from around South Taranaki that I was able to still find.
You mentioned that a lot of the names on this board, this collection of old stencils, aren't farming families in the same way. They might not be in sheep anymore.
Well, a lot of the names are still farming, but a lot of them are now dairy farming rather than sheep farming. I mean, there are still some. Richmond Downs, the Hocken family out at Tarata, Pukimoy, the Duffy family at Ararata, they're still farming. The Turners at Mangamingi. Yeah, so there are some still farming, but a lot of them have converted their farms into dairying, or some of it's gone into forestry.
And is that just, I suppose, speaks to changing land use over time?
Yeah, just the economics of sheep and cattle farming. I mean, it's really pleasing to see at the moment the prices are actually quite good for lamb and beef.
It's not just about preserving the past, but ensuring a better future too. The farm is also involved in trialling a bioreactor to reduce nitrate runoff from the dairy farm.
Yeah, so the stream runs down the hill here and then down through the farm. And so Massey University, as part of the catchment group, they approached us with the idea of finding a spot to trial this bioreactor.
And what is a bioreactor?
So a bioreactor is basically it's a whole lot of wood chip, so that you put the water through wood chip, filter it through it, and it takes the nitrates out of the water. After it's been through, the nitrate levels in the water should be a lot less than when it entered. So if we just wander over here, you can see some of the wood chip.
Oh, so that barrel over there, kind of like a skylight.
Yes, it's around about 10 metres by 5 metres, the wood chip bed, and that's the wood chip there just showing. And then the water comes down the hill and it spreads out across the wood chip and then filters down through it and then comes out the other end.
And as you say, so you do a bit of testing at the start,
yes,
bit of testing at the end to see
so
the nitrate levels.
They've already tested the water to work out what it's going in, and they'll continue to do that, and then they'll start monitoring the water as it's coming out.
That was Ross Dunlop speaking to Janina Schwaneker at his family farm in Huntaway along the coast of southern Taranaki.
Now it's time for a wrap of what's been making headlines on the Rural News Desk this week. Primary sector exports remain the backbone of a record trade performance, resulting in a surplus hitting $1.4 billion last month. Stats NZ says the overlap of the dairy and fruit industry seasons contributed to the high, and it's only the fifth time there's been a monthly surplus over $1 billion. Fruit was up $265 million to $1.2 billion. Exports of logs and wood products rose 42% on the year before. Milk powder was the largest contributor to exports last month, reaching $1 billion, an increase of 32% compared with April 2024.
Meanwhile, farmers say the budget didn't provide the gold rush that they may have wanted, but there are some positive announcements. Federated Farmers President for Hawke's Bay, Jim Galloway, says it's pleasing a post-Cyclone Gabrielle funding boost for the region's roads is included, as there's still a lot of work to do.
There's some good things in there, and I like from a local Hawke's Bay and Gisborne and the other areas hit by Gabrielle is the extra money put in for local roads. In Hastings district where I am, there were 19 bridges and large culverts taken out, 161 bridges needing repair and hundreds of slips. So repairing and the paying for it is going to take 15, 20 years. So this all will help.
Jim Galloway says a tax incentive allowing businesses to immediately deduct 20% depreciation off any new machinery or equipment will go a long way for the primary sector. The big winner, though, was health, with more than 70 rural and remote communities to receive more financial support from the government for urgent and after-hours health care. $164 million over 4 years will contribute to extended clinic time and improved access to diagnostics and medicines. New services will also be trialled in Twizel, Tākaka, Turangi, Te Kuiti, Coromandel and Great Barrier Island, before being rolled out nationwide.
A new report commissioned by Horticulture New Zealand shows the future of horticulture in Aotearoa is increasingly Māori. It found the amount of Māori land in horticulture has increased by 50% since 2017 and now makes up about 7% of all horticultural land in New Zealand. Horticulture New Zealand Chief Executive Kate Scott says this is exciting, especially as overall horticultural land has been shrinking.
We were so pleased to see that upward increase in not just the hectares of land, but in the percentage of land that was being used for growing fresh fruit and vegetables across New Zealand. As Māori landowners look to want to increase the economic value of their land and opportunities for Māori across land use, that horticulture is starting to present a real opportunity for a diversified approach and high value land use.
The report found the total amount earned from Māori horticulture has also increased from over $220 million in 2019 to $305 million last year.
Sticking with horticulture, organic sun-gold kiwifruit tops the podium for Zesbury's latest fruit season, but other varieties are not as fortunate. Prices across almost all varieties have dropped compared to last year, except for organic sun gold, which is at a record $15.20 a tray, a 3% increase on last year. The biggest drop is for green kiwifruit, down 12% from last year's record to $8.36 a tray. Zesbury says there's been good demand from North America and some European countries, helping to offset lower consumption in Asia.
Skyrocketing butter prices have forced a commercial bakery in a primary dairying region to scour the global market for cheaper alternatives. The owner of Kay's Bakery in Invercargill, Luella Peniel, says she buys in 10 tonnes of butter at a time through an Australian broker. She says American butter was recently offered at a significant cost saving, but she'd prefer to support New Zealand farmers. She says the business can't absorb current price rises for its key ingredients any longer without passing them on. At this week's global dairy trade auction, the price of butter fell 1.5% to $7,800 a tonne after hitting a record high of $7,900 at the previous auction.
And difficulty sourcing lamb for meat processing plants is driving prices up. They're now up to $9 per kilogram. Here's AgriHQ senior analyst Mel Crode.
Some slaughter processing capacity is coming out of the system, either through the end of shifts at some plants or via scheduled maintenance closures. Both domestic and export markets continue to track well. The real issue, though, is finding enough lamb to meet customer orders. We have seen a few minor increases in prices reported into China, which has traders in good spirits, purely given that sales are usually flat into this market at this time of the year just due to China shifting towards the summer months.
Mel Crode says EU demand is varied depending on the cut. Restaurant-type cuts and those good for the barbecue are selling well as they move into the summer too.
Scientists looking into facial eczema, a disease which affects sheep, have made a scientific breakthrough. New research has revealed 2 species of the fungus in New Zealand pasture, not just one as previously thought. One is toxic and the other isn't. Here's Dr. Bevan Weir of Manaki Whenua Landcare Research.
It was amazing when, we got the first DNA sequencing data and there was just this incredibly clear split showing that there was these definitely 2 species on pasture. Yeah, it was a fantastic experience figuring out that we've kind of cracked it.
Dr. Weir says their research will help them identify where the toxic and non-toxic species are found in New Zealand, but there's generally very few toxic ones found in the South Island.
And lastly, the Ministry for Business Innovation and Employment is funding a 5-year trial to breed scallops at the top of the South Island. Project lead, Cawthron Institute's aquaculture scientist Dr. Kevin Heisman, says there's a large demand for scallops, but the supply is limited. The new structures containing trays of young scallops, or spat, have been sunk 15 metres below the sea surface in the Tasman district.
They've been going on it'll be a year in June. They are actually growing very nicely with a high survival rate. We check them monthly just to have a quick look and see how they're doing, and we're looking at how they do with different densities because we don't want them to overcrowd, but with the same token we need a critical mass for economic viability.
Dr. Heisman says they're pleased with the trial that's expected to take another year. And that's the rural news for this week.
You're listening to Country Life on RNZ National 101 FM.
Have you ever wondered what the difference is between a heading dog and a Huntaway? Well, here's a Wairarapa dog trialist, Chris Shaw, to break it down for you.
Hi, my name's Chris Shaw and I'm a stock manager on a little place called Urity out at Homewood. It's a 1,200 hectare sheep and beef breeding unit. I've been farming for almost 20 years, and in that time I've been associated with dogs of all calibres, heading dogs, Huntaways, pig dogs, the whole shebang, house pets. My first farming job, we went to Rocky Hawkins, had a dog sale up in Hawke's Bay, so we purchased my first dog there. He was a 7-year-old dog, and pretty much from that dog onwards, I've sort of trained and bred my own dogs ever since. So yeah, it'd be a good 19, almost 20 years now. So if I had to put it sort of plain and simple, I was taught when I was from my first farm job, I was lucky enough to be surrounded by a couple of very good dogmen, and one of those dogmen said to me, he said, your team of dogs is like your bag of golf clubs. Every dog has a job. Your Huntaways are pretty much the motor of the team. When stock start getting a bit sticky, they're the ones that sort of help to move your stock, whereas your heading dogs are more like your steering on a car. They sort of steer the mob to where you want it to go.
RNZ this year marks its 100th birthday, and I've spent a happy few hours trawling through old recordings of some of our illustrious rural broadcasters and their yarns. To mark the centenary, we thought we'd bring you some of the voices and stories from RNZ's rural teams over the years.
Open country. People and places out of town.
That was the opening to arguably one of this public broadcaster's most well-loved rural shows, aside from Country Life, of course. Open Country aired weekly during the 1960s and 70s.
There's a creek near Hokitika called Johnny the Greek's Creek. Dan Graney, old-time roadman of Jackson's Bay, just lately retired, Dan knows why. Creeks usually were named after the first digger staking his claim.
When it ended in 1975, there was even a public campaign to save the show, Save Open Country.
Reckoned even the tuies on the remus were singing, "There's no gold."
Rural broadcasting started in one form or another well before that. The Radio Broadcasting Company, officially incorporated in August 1925 and a forerunner to RNZ, was in fact set up with the intent to get information to farmers. Founder William Goodfellow of the New Zealand Cooperative Dairy Company thought it'd be a great way to bring weather reports, sheep and wool prices to those in the backcountry particularly. Entertainment too, and a connection with townies. It seems the earliest rural broadcast in the archives goes back to 1937, when the government had the biggest role in disseminating information on the airwaves. Here's the Director-General of Agriculture giving a talk on grassland farming.
As this address is being broadcast, there will be many listening in, apart from members of the New Zealand Grasslands Association. So I propose to deal only with certain aspects of New Zealand grassland farming as it exists today, and outline the general philosophy that underlies some New Zealand practices.
And here's the Minister of Agriculture, Ted Cullen, introducing a new service for farmers in 1946.
Good afternoon, listeners. As Minister of Agriculture, it gives me great pleasure to say a few words on the inauguration of this new service to farmers, which will be a regular feature from station 2YZ at 20 minutes to 1 o'clock every Thursday. I do not believe that many of you need reminding how powerful and effective a medium the radio can be. In under 20 years, the radio has graduated from a luxury to a necessity, and I doubt very much whether there are many farmers who, through lack of a radio, are unable to tune in to the news and entertainment which is provided on a Dominion-wide basis.
The 1950s have been described as the golden years of radio before the advent of TV in New Zealand. By 1953, 17 radio stations around the country were broadcasting programs for farmers. And a year later, Bruce Broadhead started as the first full-time rural broadcaster.
After a good deal of negotiation, I managed to get a daily farm program at what was then radio's peak time, which was 7:45 to 8 o'clock at night. Then I was able then to include all sorts of interviews and with farmers and stock sale reports, and make a proper magazine program of it on a daily basis for the first time, probably. At the time I joined, the portable recorder had just come in, a thing called an L2B, which was a very dubious piece of equipment. It used to digest its own tape and run at different speeds, and often you had to record something 4 or 5 times before you got a decent recording. But it was very handy, of course, for talking to farmers out in the provinces, out on their farms, which you couldn't do before readily. There wasn't much transport available in those days, and you had to sort of beg around to see if you could get somebody to take you around to the outreach, to the far reaches of your province. And there were various people like dairy board officers, or a chap called Harry Whittier Smith, who worked for Challenge Phosphate, and the pig council people and so on. They used to be very helpful in taking you around for maybe a week to various interesting people, and people growing tea or bananas, or farmers who were doing a particularly good job. And that was the way I used to gather a great harvest of material for a week, and then come back and use it over a period of maybe a month before going off again to some other part of the province.
Monty Python-esque humour was rife among the team in the 1960s and 70s, such as this spoof on the long-running Golden Shears competition, a wool shearing and wool handling competition in Masterton. Here's presenter Hildred Carlisle with a contest to test out dairy farmers.
Well, the 1969 Golden Cups, the primary event in the dairy farming sporting calendar, is already underway. And we hand you over to well-known commentator Bodfrey Goran, who takes up the Golden Cups Open Final with 3 cows to go.
On stand number 1, the first herringbone, it's the tall lad, Peter Davis from Te Arawa. Doing nothing wrong, this boy. Beautiful style on the long washing down blow. Great rhythm. Not a movement wasted as he slips the cups on his last cow. Stand number 2, another herringbone, is Taranaki's lad, just 17. Ted McCulloch, only been milking a couple of seasons, but he's up with the best. He's fallen back a bit with the last batch of cows. Still got the cups in the last 2 and 3 more to get in.
You get the picture. A network of rural broadcasters had been reporting since the late 1950s, including Colin Follis, based in Palmerston North. He'd grown up on a dairy farm and became a stock agent before turning to broadcasting.
We used to record programs 3 times a week, put them together in Palmerston North, and they went down on Newman's bus to Wellington, and they were played out of 2AA in Wellington. I think there were 5 of us at that stage. There was Jim Taylor in Wellington, Jim Schooler in Christchurch, Gerard Curran in Dunedin, and Fred Barnes up in Hamilton. And then Fred went to Wellington to start Country Calendar as the first frontman on Country Calendar, and I took his job in Hamilton. And it slightly expanded from then on, really. They sort of saw rural broadcasting as having a sort of a potential. And in Hamilton in those days, of course, we had a program called Rural Roundup, which was at 5 a.m. till 6 a.m. We did a program for dairy farmers, which Fred Barnes started. We used to have a lot of fun. You know, it was 6 days a week. You'd have to get up at 4:30 and churn out this program. And it went out on Tamaranui, Tokoroa, Rotorua, and in Taupo. And in those early days, when you arrived at the studio, you were there all by yourself and had to turn the lights on and get all those other little stations turned on. They had this amazing thing where you dialed a number on the telephone. And quite often you'd be on air and the phone would go and it'd be some guy in Rotorua would say, "How come you're not turned on this morning?" So you have to sprint down the corridor, dial a number again, and there was no way of knowing it actually turned on, you know, it actually switched on. So it really was steam radio, but we had a lot of fun.
Here's Colin interviewing in another memorable send-up.
Well, Mr. Vodanovich, we had a look around this farm here of yours today at Te Puke, and to my knowledge this would certainly be the only macaroni growing farm or portion of a farm in New Zealand. But where did you actually get the idea of growing these vines here in New Zealand?
Well, Colin, I was in Italy during the war with the 2nd Expeditionary Force and made a lot of good friends over there. And of course, they were growing spaghetti and macaroni over there. And I paid quite a bit of attention to it. I was interested in local life and customs. And what actually happened was I was talking to my grocer about the price of macaroni, and the wife was saying too, it's too high, you know, you can't afford to have it every day as your staple diet. We're very fond of it. And so, I was just interested whether I could grow it over here. So I wrote to some friends I got in Italy, and they said, oh yeah, they'd send me cuttings. So I got some cuttings, and that's how it started.
What are the actual stages of growing? How do you actually go about growing it?
Well, it's got to be grafted. We get the young plants in from Italy and the young cuttings, and they've got to be quarantined, of course, by the Department of Agriculture and very carefully inspected. They're all fumigated. Well, I think they could. We found it to be very worthwhile. This is our 2nd year, and it's been very worthwhile indeed. The only difficulty, and this is one we're still fighting on, as you probably realise, is the importation of the beetle that bores the holes in the centre of the macaroni. And this, of course, is really the hardest part of the macaroni growing. Anybody can grow a plant, but you've got to encourage these beetles to lay their eggs in the plant and bore the centres out of the macaroni stems.
It's a special beetle then?
It is a special beetle. This also comes from Italy, though there's a very good strain now available which we're working on from Chile.
This is World Broadcasting of the New Zealand Broadcasting Corporation, a service for all agriculturalists, farmers, peasants, bucolics, rustics, all those who go down to the land in gumboots.
In a more serious vein, Department of Agriculture staff continued to provide and present information, including the Ruakura report. John Scott did so in the 1960s.
At that time, we were the sort of leading light in as a research centre, probably one of the best known animal research centres in the world, and there was a lot of new information. It was in the relatively early days, so there was a lot of new stuff coming forward all the time. And of course there were some pretty momentous occasions. There was the breakthrough in facial eczema when it was found that thiabendazole, the anthelmintic, would do the trick in controlling the fungi. It was first broadcast in radio, and that type of event, it was a great opportunity to be able to talk to it and talk to the people who were responsible. And we viewed it as a great opportunity really to sell our work.
At the other end of the spectrum, the beautifully paced and laconic style of open country.
Well, we're out now in open country, good and proper, about 10 miles from Taupo, where the rabbits are pretty thick. And on the job is a good, keen man, none other than Barry Crump. You know, his book, A Good Keen Man, 13,000 copies in 6 months. And Barry, who's 25 years old, is yarning with Lindsay Broberg from Rotorua about his new job, rabbiting.
Oh, well, you get up in the morning and you go out. Usually got a pack of dogs tearing around everywhere. If they put a rabbit out, you have a shot at it. If you miss, there's no one breathing over your shoulder anyhow. If you get it, you get it.
And what's the general scheme? Do you supply your own dogs?
Yes, I usually keep a pack of dogs. Something that's a bit versatile. Your rabbit dog's not much good if he couldn't catch a pig for you.
Yeah. How many did you have down the Wairarapa?
Oh, there's about 14 down there. None of them much good.
Yeah. And were they, or did you bring them up here with you?
No, I got rid of them. I got another bunch off an old rabbiter when I started up here.
And do you have to train them yourself?
Oh, there's nothing much in training a rabbit dog. If a dog sees another dog chasing a rabbit, it automatically becomes a rabbit dog.
Yeah, it's a scory. Have they got names, or they're just so-and-sos?
Well, you can call them pretty horrible things when they won't do what they're told.
Must be a problem keeping them fed, then.
Oh, if you're living around where you can bowl a deer, now and again you do all right. Dead sheep lying around the paddocks, you whip the legs off for your dog.
Well, I'm David Knowles, but I'm also known as Ned. It was a nickname given to me in about 68 because of my liking for the goons.
Ned is the longest-serving member of the rural team at RNZ, and he's still working on country life today.
I started in January 67. We'll let people do the maths, but it does mean that I've been in the company more than half its existence. I started as a technician, moved to being a studio engineer, studio operator was it called, and then ran a section called Recording Centre, Head Office Recording Centre. One day I was going down the stairs and Wendy McGregor, the head of features, was going up and said, "Oh, Ned, do you want to present Country Life?" And I said, "Well, give it a go."
G'day.
Hi there.
David Knowles in Wellington.
And Susan Murray in Hamilton. Thanks for joining us today as we roll back the years and listen to a potted history of rural radio in New Zealand.
Around the country, the North Island is still desperate for rain in most areas, and in the South Island, Marlborough may be short of tanks.
Someone asked me once, what qualifies you to be a rural broadcaster? I said, "Oh, I stood near a farm once."
You've seen presenters come and go?
Yes, yeah. There were some great old-timers, and a lot of them I never met because they're in the regions. But, and of course, we move on in some way to the presentation style of the 60s when I joined, which was a funny version of BBC English. Actually, going back further, a lot of the programs were prefixed with, "We present Open Country," which started with a whistle.
Open country. People and places out of town.
There was still a lot of good feeling, a lot of humour about the place, and that seeped through into the programs. And it made the presentation, in a way, better because everyone was, most of the time, in a good mood about it.
The Country Session, a programme about country affairs and the affairs of the country.
Agriculture has changed, but our art of storytelling, in a way, is still the same in some ways, but it has gone along with the technology.
And the theme music's changed too, from the 70s vibe to pure country. Country Life's own theme tune, composed by former Rural News editor Kevin Eichen. Now, you may be wondering where the women's voices are. And it wasn't until the mid-1970s that Liz Rivers joined the team. In 1975, Irene Strong followed a few years later.
Yeah, it was an exciting time to try to, again, bridge the gap, as it were, to take it away from being what people used to call a gentleman's program into the modern world. It certainly was a time when there were few women in agriculture or in a high-profile role in agriculture. I remember going to a Christmas party, one of the office type Christmas parties put on by one of the big stock and station firms. And to my horror, discovered I was the only woman there.
2ZC's Country Corner with Hugh Chappell.
Thanks, Dave, and a very good afternoon, everybody. The Hawke's Bay and East Coast Aero Club offer you their executive service flight in a
program from September 1974, which included half a dozen commercials and a 3-minute editorial comment on milk, its popularity, and possible deregulation of the industry.
That's rural broadcaster Hugh Chappell, reflecting on rural broadcasting back in 1996.
In some cases, the annual advertising revenue from commercial programs was 3 times the rural broadcaster's salary and made them a valuable asset for commercial radio station managers. However, for the past 10 years, rural journalists, as team members are now called, have worked solely for national radio. In the past 42 years, since Bruce Broadhead was appointed the first rural broadcaster, the rural section has undergone a number of changes, the first major one being the separation of radio and television in 1975. Then in the late 70s and early 80s it became very business-oriented and generated a considerable income for commercial radio. In 1985 more reorganisation took place, with some members of the team becoming regional rural journalists with a responsibility to Wellington, others had a responsibility to their local station. Then a couple of years later everyone became part of a national team once more. And what of the future? At this stage the new state model for Radio New Zealand does provide for rural news programs, but the sun will set on a rurals team as such.
RNZ remains commercial free, funded by New Zealand On Air and operating under a charter, an independent public broadcaster serving the public interest. RNZ's rural radio programs have had their fair share of scoops, like this back in the early years of Country Life, with Brian Crump in the presenter's seat.
1080 carrots were being used by South Island high country farmers to spread a strain of RCD illegally brought into the country.
It was in that Country Life show in 1997 when producer Sarah Willis broke an important story about rabbit calicivirus.
As many had promised, after MAF rejected the initial application to bring in RCD, the disease was here anyway. In fact, farmers had had it for close to 2 months before the news broke in late August. And the first person they told? Our Sarah.
But what about the legality of it? What about the fact that it was an illegal organism, so to speak?
Well, we didn't really actually think too much about that at that stage, because we had something that we knew was in 43 other countries of the world. We knew from all the submissions, from all the paperwork that had been gone through to find out whether we could have it in New Zealand, that it was not going to harm.
Righto, we start with pen 351. Quality line up here, regular vendor of the Reshon Partnership from out of the Lees Valley. They would have been farmed out on the Oxford Plains there for some time off the back of weeding.
Stock sales, tales from the high country and life down country roads still make good yarns. But increasingly, there are mental health, environmental and land use issues to weave into rural stories, as well as looking to a future of high-tech farming and AI, not the artificial insemination sort. There are some themes that never change, though, for rural communities, like dealing with disaster.
I've just arrived at the fault line, which cuts right across Telegraph Road and in fact has twisted the road a bit. It's put a kink in the road and it's cut through the forest beside the road, and along the line all the trees have fallen over in the same direction. All the roots are sticking up in the air and it's quite a spectacular sight, really, seeing all the trees down. Just down the road is the epicentre, and I might go and have a look at that before I head over to Michael Oakley's potato seed farm, which is as the crow flies about.
I hear this banging. I looked out the back window just in time to see there was a whole row of willow trees there that you can see. One got ripped completely out of the ground and then I saw these logs just poking up and banging and crashing, and the noise was tremendous because the water was right up there. There's all these logs that come in there crashing. I thought we were going to come through the bus. Proud as we were, we thought we were going to make do on our own, if you know what I mean. We'll live in the bus and we'll do this and we'll do that. But Things change. Things change, and after a while you think, I'm not as tough as I thought I was.
Taking its toll.
It's taking its toll.
And to the rural news now with Sally Murphy. Good morning, Sally.
Good morning.
RNZ still has a rural news team, much smaller now, and still a dedicated slot in the early morning and around 12:30. As always, catching farmers over lunch, if they do have a lunch break these days.
Who grow maize for grain, they're facing another turbulent year, are they?
They are, and this is pretty significant because if the returns remain low, then Kiwi farmers will stop growing it and will need to rely even more on imported grain to use as stock feed. Last year, many growers were left...
Food and fibre production and farming in general remain a crucial part of New Zealand's economy. And 100 years on from the birth of public broadcasting, RNZ continues to bring rural news, features and country yarns to the whole of Aotearoa. And much of that archive audio was supplied by Ngā Taonga Sound and Vision. So thanks to the team there for all their help putting the story together.
Kia ora, I'm Andy Blair from Upflow. We're trying to create feed from carbon dioxide and methane to feed your stock. You're listening to Country Life on RNZ National.
Now we're heading to a multifaceted wool venture near Christchurch, where you'll find a warm and snuggly alternative to the traditional wooden coffin. John and Marilyn Betts started Yuldhurst Wools in the 1980s and have since handed the baton to their daughter Polly McGuckin and her husband Ross. The wool merchant and exporting business has grown a lot over the past 20 years. As well as selling bales, the exquisite wool's labels have been developed selling woolen products like blankets, and there's another more unusual product on the shelf. We'll find out more about the woolen caskets soon. But first, Cosmo Kentish Barnes is with Ross in the busy wool store.
Ross, you've just pulled some wool out of a bale and you're checking it. What are you looking for?
I'm looking for colour and I'm looking for length of the fibre. So what I've got here are some second share merino bellies and second pieces. So I'm just looking to see what line I put them into.
You've got hundreds of bales of wool here.
Yeah, it's amazing what comes in every day. There's always something different coming on. So you never know what you do from day to day.
And Ross, give me an overview of what you do here.
We're a private wool buyer and exporter, so we go to farms and we tell the farmers how the trade's going, what's happening with the market overseas, and then make sure when they share, all wool goes into the main lines, the right types, so buyers know what they're buying.
It's been a tough time for farmers over the past decade or so with low wool prices, but it sounds like things are slowly starting to pick up, especially for crossbred wool.
Crossbred wool has made quite a big resurgence this season. It's a matter of carrying on with that now too, and to keep farmers wanting to produce the nice crossbred fleece wool and second shares for that matter.
So will this merino here that you're checking go overseas?
This will go overseas in a greasy state, so it'll be scoured offshore, like most of our merino wool does, to be honest.
Yep. So how does it work? Do wool buyers come to you and check out what you've got and then purchase the wool on behalf of the foreign buyers?
Correct, yeah, they do. So what we do, we get a line of wool, which could be 10 bales or 15 bales. We test it, we grab it, and we have our own display centre here too, where the buyers come and value wool from there.
Yes. So sometimes I guess you're able to tell farmers where the wool's going.
Absolutely. Yeah, eventually we let them know where it's going to.
Which is nice for the farmers.
Oh, you have to these days, and that's what people ask for.
And so have you got a truck coming in to pick up some bales today?
We had one come in, go out already, and we do have another one for the wool scout to go out reasonably soon. So that goes to Timaru. That can go anywhere between 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so sort of quite nice timing.
And what do you love about wool? What made you want to get into this industry in the first place?
I think we're born and bred on farm. And that something even my grandfather and father, we started out in the wool shed as very young kids, and you carry on doing it.
You always had that love for wool?
Just enjoyed it.
Do you have a farm as well?
Oh, we've got a lifestyle block, a few sheep. Yeah, we do.
Yeah. Excellent. We'll keep up the good work and hopefully things will be getting better and better for our farmers.
Oh, let's hope so. Absolutely. Yeah, just onwards and upwards with this beautiful fibre.
Now, Polly, you're the other side to this business, aren't you?
That's right, exquisite wool traders.
You add value to wool.
Yes, so we're doing the other side, which is the product side. So we started out doing bedding blankets, and then that was going on for 3 years, and then we got offered natural legacy woolen caskets, which we've been doing now for over 13 years.
Are they made from New Zealand wool?
Yes. Yeah, so that was the requirement. It had to be New Zealand wool, and yes, so each colour is 100% New Zealand wool.
Do you select the wool from your wool store here?
So Ross does, that's Ross's side.
For the caskets?
Yes. So here we've got the caskets. So main freight will drive in here, load up, and they go out on that day of order.
This is a big one, isn't it?
Yeah, so it comes in 3 sizes, and we do ash urns as well. So the 2 colours is a wool white and a sandstone grey.
It's quite hard, isn't it? I thought it was going to be softer, but it's quite rigid.
Stand up to 42 stone, which is about 222 kgs.
Gosh, a big person.
So it goes through this big wash, so it's like a felt. And then it's got jute underneath that goes right around the casket like a handbag if it has straps right around that gives you strong reinforcing. So it's been very well designed.
How many fleeces worth of wool does one of these caskets take on average?
Yeah, equivalent to 3 fleeces per casket.
A lot of wool. So where are these caskets made?
So they're made in the UK by an old mill, and the story was they researched back in time in the 1700s why the wool industry had a resurgence, and it was to do with, it was passed in Parliament that everyone be wrapped in a woolen shroud. So they thought, why don't we start designing a casket? And that's how it all got started.
So why don't they make them here in New Zealand? Because you send your wool over there, don't you?
Yes, we do. We are limited for manufacturing in New Zealand, and to be honest, the mill spent a small fortune in designing, not only designing, but the milling of this cloth.
And I guess it must be biodegradable once it goes in the ground.
Yeah, so it's suited to eco-burial, which are becoming more popular. So you're not allowed glues or staples or anything like that. Nails. The loved one has to be buried with no non-biodegradable shoes or clothing. It has to be natural fibre, not synthetic. So they are suitable for eco-burial and cremation as well. They're very low in emissions for cremation. So it's just as any casket, but the added benefit is it's eco-burial as well.
Is it quite challenging marketing caskets?
Very challenging. We have let it grow organically because it's an item that is end of life, so it's very hard to promote in magazines and out on social media, so it's really grown organically through families seeing it at a funeral. And Patrick can enlighten you a bit more about the whole marketing side.
So Patrick, you are doing the marketing for Exquisite Wools. How long have you been in the role for?
I've been probably working here full time for the last couple of years, but I started out helping out in the summer holidays about 3 or 4 years ago.
You're part of the family as well?
Yes, I'm Holly's nephew.
And Patrick, you were saying that sales are going pretty well.
Yeah, it's strange, like the last couple of weeks it's been completely going off, but it goes through periods like that, but it's always very steady sales. Like, it's a hard thing to say that it's doing well because it's an unfortunate thing, but it's really nice to be able to offer the families a soft alternative. And in the last couple of weeks we've sold like almost dozens. I know families personally that have had them, and they just said it was a really nice alternative, especially when the family's coming from a farming background. That meant a lot to them.
Yeah, you'd think people from farms would be interested in this option.
It does tend to be a lot of farmers that are interested in it, but even more recently a lot of city goers have been loving the caskets.
So there are how many? 1, 2, 3, 4 caskets here, and they are going to be shipped out today, all over the country?
One's going to Dunedin, one's going here in Christchurch, and there's someone interested in Auckland, but yeah, they can be sent anywhere.
I guess you could just about sleep in one of these caskets. They'd be quite comfortable, I imagine, and cosy.
And they've come with a wee pillow and they're lined with like a cotton sort of curtain.
There is a wool pillow inner in there.
Polly McGuckin, there along with Patrick Cotter admiring a natural legacy woolen casket. Cosmo was also chatting with Ross McGuckin. You should take a look at the photos at rnz.co.nz/countrylife.
Well, that's it for Country Life this week. It's great to hear from you. You can contact us at country@rnz.co.nz, and you can follow and listen to Country Life wherever you get your podcasts.
You can read more, find photos and listen again to the stories you've heard by checking out the episode notes or heading to rnz.co.nz/countrylife.
The stories today were produced and presented by Cosmo Kentish-Barnes, Janina Schwaneker and me, Sally Round.
In the studio production team today, David Knowles and Phil Benge.
Ka kite anō.
Catch you next time.